Demet stood by the large window of her apartment, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of the coffee cup that had gone cold hours ago. The lights of Istanbul flickered like restless stars, cars passed below her, and in the distance, the Bosphorus glimmered silently. But all she could think about was him. Can. It had been weeks since they last truly spoke. Not about work. Not about public appearances. But truly spoke, in the quiet, vulnerable way they used to, when the cameras were off and nothing existed between them except raw emotion and the space of a few breaths. And yet, tonight had promised to be different. Let's talk. Just you and me. No press. No expectations, he had said over the phone, his voice low, hesitant, like he was trying to find the right version of himself again. I'll come by at 9. I owe you that much. Demet hadn't answered right away. Her throat had tightened. She wanted to scream. To cry. To ask why now, after everything. But instead, she whispered, okay. It was 8:55 p.m. now. She had worn the sweater he once said made her look like summer wrapped in a cloud, even though it was slightly too warm for August. She had even pulled out the bottle of wine they'd saved once for a special night that never happened, as they joked back then. 9 p.m. Her heart beat faster. Every sound outside made her head snap toward the door. Her phone stayed face up on the table, silent. 9:15 p.m. Maybe traffic. Istanbul was unpredictable. 9:30 p.m. Still no message. Still no knock. She paced the room. Memories began bleeding through, the way his hand used to find hers under the table at interviews, the times he'd sent her cryptic song lyrics at midnight, the way he once kissed her shoulder during a break between scenes and whispered, "This feels more real than anything." 9:45 p.m. Demet sat down on the edge of her couch, legs folded, arms hugging a pillow like it could stop the ache forming in her chest. The clock ticked like a taunt. 10:10 p.m. She called once. No answer. She called again. Straight to voicemail. He wasn't coming. He had promised. But he wasn't coming. And suddenly, the silence wasn't just silence anymore. It was an answer. It was past midnight when Demet finally stood up. Her legs felt numb, not just from sitting but from the weight of all the unspoken things between them, the questions she never got to ask, the answers he never gave. The wine remained untouched. The candles had melted into soft puddles of forgotten warmth. She walked over to the door once more, opened it slowly, almost hoping that maybe, just maybe, he had fallen asleep in the hallway like he once did when he didn't want to leave her apartment. But the corridor was empty. Not even the echo of footsteps. Just a faint hum from the ceiling light and the distant bark of a street dog somewhere below. She closed the door softly, as if doing it too fast might wake something inside her that she wasn't ready to face yet. Ken hadn't come. Not because of traffic. Not because he forgot. He had chosen not to. That was the part that hurt the most. The choice. It wasn't about scheduling, or a broken phone, or some emergency. It was about him making a decision, to let the night pass. To let her wait. To let her believe, for hours, that maybe this time, he would do things differently. But he didn't. Demet sat on the floor, her back against the cold wall. And for the first time in months, she let herself cry without holding back. No tissue. No careful dabs. Just raw, shaking sobs that ripped through her chest like waves breaking against stone. She remembered how they used to dream about a life away from the cameras, a house near the sea, maybe in Bodrum, maybe in Italy. A dog. Quiet breakfasts. Lazy Sunday mornings. And yet, here she was. Alone. In the same apartment where those dreams were born. And now, where they were slowly dying. She opened her phone again. No new messages. No missed calls. Just his last text from 3 days ago, "Let's talk soon. I miss the old US." the old us. What did that even mean anymore? She typed something, then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. What was there to say to someone who didn't show up? What was there left when love became one-sided? Suddenly, the silence in the room wasn't just silence, it was filled with every word he didn't say, every explanation he didn't give, every apology she would never hear. She got up and walked to the window again, looking out into the city that never really slept. Somewhere out there, he was probably asleep. Or laughing. Or maybe even with someone else. A sharp sting in her chest made her flinch. Not from jealousy, but from abandonment. That night, she didn't sleep. She just watched the city slowly shift from night into dawn, her heart aching with every minute that passed, realizing that waiting for someone who had no intention of coming was a kind of heartbreak that didn't explode, it just quietly killed something inside you. When the first light of morning slipped through the blinds, Demet was still awake. Her body was heavy with exhaustion, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying the same moment, her sitting by the door, waiting, still hoping. A part of her had foolishly clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, he'd come at 3 a.m. like in the movies. That he'd knock, out of breath, eyes full of regret, and say something like, "I couldn't stay away." But he didn't. And as the sun crept in, it didn't bring clarity. It just brought reality. He wasn't coming. He had never planned to. That was the truth she hadn't wanted to see the night before. But in the quiet light of morning, it was impossible to ignore. He had let her wait. And by doing so, he had told her everything. Not with words, but with absence. Not with anger, but with indifference. Not with a goodbye, but with silence. She walked over to the mirror in her hallway. Her eyes were puffy, her hair a mess, but her expression, strangely, was calm. There was a sadness, yes. A deep, aching sadness. But also a clarity that hadn't been there before. She whispered to her reflection, almost like a vow to herself, "This was the last time I wait for someone who doesn't choose me." And she meant it. Because the waiting had done something irreversible. It had broken a part of her that once believed in second chances. In late-night apologies. In grand gestures. There would be no more waiting. Not for late texts. Not for missed calls. Not for promises whispered and never kept. That afternoon, Demet did something she hadn't done in weeks. She packed a bag, turned off her phone, and left the city for a few days. No paparazzi. No friends. No managers. Just her, a small coastal town, and the decision to let herself grieve, not for him, but for the version of her that waited so long for someone who never came. In her silence, there was power. In her letting go, there was rebirth. And in her absence, perhaps for the first time, Can felt something he hadn't expected, the weight of losing someone who had already forgiven him 100 times in her heart, but not once more. Every time he stumbled, every time he hurt her, she found a way to forgive, to hope, to believe that things could be different. Yet, forgiveness is not endless. There is a limit where even the deepest love can no longer hold the cracks together. And that limit, that final boundary, had been reached. Days later, he saw her story. Just a single photo. No words, no explanation. Just her, standing alone on a quiet beach. The wind tangled through her hair, her eyes gently closed, face lifted towards the sun. It was a picture that spoke volumes in its silence. It was strength and sorrow intertwined. A silent message that said more than any conversation could. In that moment, the truth he had been running from, avoiding, denying, finally hit him with the force of 1,000 regrets. She had waited for him. Hours, days, maybe even a lifetime in her heart. But he hadn't come. Not then, not when it mattered most. And now, she wasn't waiting anymore. No longer waiting for a knock at the door, for a call, for a simple explanation. She wasn't waiting for him to change his mind or to find his way back. She had chosen herself, her peace, her healing. And that, more than anything else, was what truly broke him. Not the silence, not the distance, but the realization that she had stopped hoping. That the one person who once held the key to her heart had let go, leaving behind an emptiness filled with all the words left unsaid.